Hello guys, and welcome to another video and another Keystone highlight. This is a video series covering many of Path of Exile's Keystone passive skills, discussing their mechanics and interactions and their use case in various builds. And if you're interested in more of these videos, you can find the full playlist here. So this particular Keystone highlight is for Transcendence, and this is a timeless Keystone passive skill, which means that it can be acquired by socketing a timeless jewel into your passive tree, and these special jewels dominate the passive skills within their radius, including Keystone passives, which are transformed into new Keystone passive skills based on the type of timeless jewel and the name on the jewel itself. Transcendence is granted by the Militant Faith timeless jewel when it's in the name of Maxarius. The Transcendence Keystone has two modifiers. Armour applies to fire, cold and lightning damage taken from hits instead of physical damage, and minus 15% to all maximum elemental resistances. So this is a mechanic which takes the damage reduction mechanic from Armour and applies it to a different type of damage instead, that being elemental damage, whilst also applying a very heavy penalty to maximum elemental resistances. And this is really one of the best examples of a true Path of Exile Keystone, where the upside is incredibly powerful, but the downsides cannot be ignored and must be dealt with prior to allocating the Keystone, which ultimately also makes it very much an endgame Keystone, and not likely something you're going to use in earlier progression. So technically, Transcendence has two downsides, but first let's take a look at the minus 15% to all maximum elemental resistances. This is just a gigantic reduction to your defense against elemental damage. At a baseline, you'll go from 75% maximum resistances down to 60%. You go from reducing elemental damage by 75% through your resistances alone to just 60%, or an increase of damage taken after resistances of 60%. For example, let's say a character took a hit of 5,000 cold damage. With 75% cold resistance, the damage would be reduced by 3,750, for a total of 1,250 damage taken after resistances. With 60% cold resistance, the damage will be reduced by 3,000 for a total of 2,000 damage taken after resistances, an increase of 60% damage taken. Now, whilst you could stack enough armour to still take a lot less damage from elemental hits, Transcendence doesn't provide any assistance with elemental damage over time, which means that by default, you're going to be taking 60% more damage from elemental damage over time, which can be very scary. Now, to solve this downside, you're going to typically have two options available. The first is the most popular option, which is the one that uses Loreweave or Replica Loreweave unique body armors. These body armors have a bunch of stats, but the important modifiers here are these ones. These modifiers are not increases or reductions to maximum resistances, but instead they provide a hard cap override which sets your maximum resistances to the value stated on the body armor. This will override any modifiers to maximum resistances, including the one on Transcendence. So a max roll Loreweave with the modifier your maximum resistances are 78% would effectively provide the equivalent of an additional 18% to all maximum elemental resistances when used with Transcendence, and a bonus 3% maximum chaos resistance too. It's easy to see why this is the most popular method to solve the negative resistances, as it's extremely efficient with only a single gear slot dedicated to solving this problem. But Loreweave does have its own problems, which we'll discuss in a little while. So you could consider instead trying to obtain enough additional maximum elemental resistances to offset the Transcendence downside. The bottom left of the passive tree has the Prismatic Skin and Soul of Steel wheels, which together provide a total of plus 4% to all maximum elemental resistances. Then another 1% maximum elemental resistance can be obtained from the Armour Mastery if your helmet, body armour, boots and gloves all have armour, and another 1% maximum elemental resistance can be gained from the Reservation Mastery if you're reserving both life and mana. This is a total of 6% maximum elemental resistances just from this part of the passive tree alone. Then, the Crystal Skin and Anointed Flesh notables provide 1% additional maximum elemental resistances each. These could be anointed. The Brass Dome unique body armour can roll up to 5% maximum elemental resistances, whilst also providing a huge amount of armour, which is very beneficial for the other modifier on Transcendence. While the Leadership's Price unique amulet can roll up to 3% maximum elemental resistances, but each element rolls separately on this one and it drops corrupted, so a good roll will be hard to find or very expensive. The Saffle's Frame unique shield grants 4% to all maximum resistances, while the Grey Spire unique staff can roll up to 4% to all maximum resistances as well. A combination of modifiers which provide all maximum elemental resistances can offset the downside of Transcendence, but you could instead potentially make use of Melding of the Flesh. This unique jewel does provide the downside of a further -4% to maximum elemental resistances even on a max roll, and a heavy resistance penalty that you'll need to make up too. But this jewel's unique modifier will make it so that all of your maximum elemental resistances match your highest maximum elemental resistance, and this will mean that you can fully focus on a single maximum resist, which is often easier to obtain in higher quantities. For example, instead of Leadership's Price with good rolls on all elements, you now only need one element to hit the 3% roll. And due to the existence of the Brine Crown unique helmet, maximum cold resistance is likely the easiest stat to focus on with this setup. The Brine Crown provides 3% to maximum cold resistance, while a level 21 Purity of Ice, scaled up to level 23 with modifiers to gem levels on gear, will provide a baseline 5% maximum cold resistance, scaling up by an additional 1% per 20% aura effect. You can then make use of a shield, such as the unique shield Aegis Aurora, or another unique shield Colton Hull, which provide 5% maximum cold resistance each, or a rare crafted shield with plus 3% to maximum cold resistance and plus 2% to all maximum resistances. There are more modifiers to maximum resistances that you can find on Corrupted or Eldritch Implicits or Influence Gear modifiers, but with this setup you'll likely begin to be getting back to the baseline 75% maximum elemental resistances or even slightly more. Now, the reason for using this setup instead of just solving the problem with Loreweave would be to save your body armor slot for the other downside of Transcendence. That's the fact that armor no longer applies its damage reduction to physical damage from hits that you take. The popular way to solve this problem is through the use of damage taken as modifiers, specifically to shift physical damage to be taken as another damage type, preferably elemental damage so that it can benefit from armor. And this is why the body armor slot is so important, because it provides the single highest amount of this stat that you can obtain, which appears on the unique Lightning Coil body armor. This modifier grants 50% of physical damage from hits taken as lightning damage. There's also the Cloak of Flame as well, which makes 40% of physical damage you take be taken as fire damage instead. And this one also works for damage over time, which is a nice bonus, but the base unfortunately provides no armor. You can gain another 20% of physical damage taken as fire from the Dawnbreaker unique shield on a max roll, and this could even provide up to 28% of physical damage taken as elemental if you had a max roll on the shield along with a max roll corrupted implicit modifier, which is likely to be very expensive. And the helmet slot can grant a further 18%, with 10% from a Veiled or Delve modifier, and up to 8% on the highest tier Eldritch Implicit. But if you use this helmet and the Dawnbreaker, you'd no longer be able to use the Brine Crown or a shield that grants maximum resistances, so you can begin to see the gearing problems posed by Transcendence. Which is why the Pathfinder Ascendancy and sometimes Chieftain are seen as good options when using this Keystone. While the Chieftain has 20% of physical damage from hits taken as fire built into the Ascendancy on the Tassadio notable, the Pathfinder can invest into Flask effect and maintain a Taste of Hate unique flask permanently thanks to the flask charge generation from the Ascendancy. Taste of Hate grants 15% of physical damage from hits taken as cold damage on a max roll, which is then scaled up further by modifiers to Flask effect. And along with a Lightning Coil and a Watcher's Eye dual modifier to grant physical damage taken as elemental while affected by a Purity aura, they'll have upwards of 80% physical damage from hits taken as elemental damage. But the flexibility of both the Pathfinder and Chieftain due to access to this chunk of extra physical damage taken as elemental means that they can also go for the other, more common route and make use of Loreweave while using a helmet for as much physical damage taken as elemental, along with the Dawnbreaker shield and a Purity Watcher's Eye. This method of solving physical damage hits is the most popular for various reasons, But there is a much less common method which involves stacking additional physical damage reduction. Although Armour no longer provides its damage reduction for physical damage hits, additional physical damage reduction like that provided by endurance charges will continue to work as normal. The Juggernaut is likely the premium choice for this method, due to the Unrelenting Ascendancy notable. With 10 endurance charges, a character with Unrelenting will already have 50% additional physical damage reduction. A further 8% can be gained as a modifier on rare armour-based body armours and shields, while the Long-Tooth Talisman grants up to 6% on its implicit. And another 8% additional physical damage reduction can be gained from a Determination Watcher's Eye modifier. And there's a few other sources of additional PDR, such as Enduring Cry, Chaos Golem's buff, aspects of the Crab, some influence gear modifiers, and a handful of unique items. This stack can be stacked up to 90%, and the nice bonus here is that it also works for physical damage over time. But do be aware that there are some monster modifiers which can overwhelm some of your physical damage reduction. So, once you've figured out the downsides of Transcendence, you can begin to benefit from its massive upside. Armour applies to fire, cold, and lightning damage taken from hits. This modifier will apply your full armour value to elemental damage taken from hits. And the reason that this modifier is so powerful is that elemental damage makes up the large majority of dangerous abilities that monsters and bosses use. And these elemental hits will first be mitigated by your resistances, and then the armour will be applied to provide elemental damage reduction, which is strong because armour is more effective against smaller hits. You can stack large amounts of armour by using gear with high armour, the Determination Aura, a Granite Flask with the increased armour suffix, a Basalt Flask, Iron Reflexes in combination with the Grace Aura, evasion-based gear, and a Jade Flask. There's the Energized Armour unique Jewel too, and there's modifiers like these ones which appear on the Armour and Evasion masteries, which treat your armour value as the percentage shown for the purpose of applying armour's damage reduction to hits. There's plenty of other things too, like Watcher's Eye modifiers, other uniques, and of course passive skill tree wheels and ascendancy notables that are great for stacking armour. So let's first take a look at a basic example of Transcendence in action, and we'll use resistance values based on a character using Loreweave. Let's say a character has 50,000 armour and 78% all maximum resistances, and is using Transcendence. The character takes a hit of 5,000 fire damage, which is first reduced by fire resistance, bringing it down to 1,100 fire damage. Then, the modifier from Transcendence applies the full armour value to the damage, providing 90% elemental damage reduction, so the character only takes 110 fire damage. You can immediately see how powerful this modifier can be, but what about some boss abilities? The Eater of Worlds beam ability deals about 24,000 lightning damage. This is first reduced by lightning resistance, bringing it down to 5,280 lightning damage. Then Armour is applied, providing 65% elemental damage reduction, and the character takes 1,848 lightning damage. And what about an elemental hit with large amounts of penetration? The Uber Shaper Ball ability deals about 13,500 cold damage, with 40% cold penetration. This is first reduced by cold resistance, bringing it down to 8,370 cold damage. Then Armour is applied, providing 54% elemental damage reduction, and the character takes 3,850 cold damage. You can see that large amounts of penetration massively reduce the effectiveness of Transcendence, as Armour is less effective against larger hits. If you'd like to learn more about the armour calculation, or see more examples of Transcendence in action, including comparisons against other popular defensive setups, I'll link a few useful videos I made on these topics in the description below if you're interested. Overall, Transcendence is one of the strongest defensive keystones in the game, but it requires an extreme amount of gearing and commitment to solving the keystone's downsides to make it work. It can be used to make some of the tankiest characters possible, and these builds often are able to shrug off some of the strongest boss abilities in the game, such as the Maven's Memory game. However, this keystone won't be of much use to the average character that's not geared properly, and will instead be of detriment, causing hits that deal large amounts of physical damage to likely outright kill the character, as armour no longer protects against these hits, while elemental damage over time deals significantly more damage to you without solving the maximum elemental resistances penalty. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. And a big thank you to these guys, my channel members. Your support is very much appreciated. If you'd like to support the growth of this channel, click the join button below to find out more. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.